that traumatic may have happened in their lives, and it's easier for them to relate it to being abducted by aliens rather than looking at the actual event and saying what happened.
Yeah, I like that. I think that that's exactly the sort of thing that could happen for some fraction of these people, and that sort of thing can happen a lot. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
Sometimes I wonder if I've told my girlfriend something, right? And I think I have. I swear I have. And then I wonder if maybe I just dreamed it, but it seems real. And so we can, in our own heads, we can really get confused by these things. And this is why in the scientific method we require reproducibility, and that if one person observes something, okay, that's interesting, but we're going to need a preponderance of repeatable observations before we're really going to buy it, before we're going to make that leap of faith into a really small step.
Yeah, I can give you a perfect example of that. My wife and I go out, I take the electronic key thing, and I lock the doors. Later on, in about 15, 20 minutes, she'll say, "Did you lock the car?"
Yeah.
And I'll say, "Yeah." And I'll say, "Yes." And she'll say, "Are you sure?" "Yeah."
Yeah.
"Are you really sure?" "Aw, damn." And I go out and check, and sure enough, I've locked the doors. So I
almost every time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. To your knowledge, sir, has there ever been any proof of the paranormal that has been reproduced in a scientific environment?
I'm not aware of anything like that. Although I know someone, actually here in the town I live in Petaluma, California, there's this place, the Institute of Noetic Science. And I talked with the director over there, Marilyn Mandela Schlitz, and I was very impressed with the level of rigor that she directs these things. And I don't know if you know what noetic science is. It was featured in Dan Brown's book.
Yes, as well as Edgar Mitchell is one of the founding members.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So, before I met her, I found it a lot easier to sort of toss this stuff aside as just, and kind of basically in scientific arrogance. And I don't find that so easy anymore. But no, to answer your question, no, I'm not aware of anything that I would say I really believe. There's things I would like to believe, but I don't. I'm more of a fan of certain paranormal phenomena than a believer.
Now, getting back to your book, just for a few minutes here, The God Patent, Witch Exonation. The website is www.thegodpatent.com. The God Patent concludes with a concept of the soul based on principles of quantum physics and artificial intelligence. Can you explain it to us?
Well, the concept of the soul, this concept in the book, is derived by a death-obsessed teenage math prodigy named Katerina. And her father died a year before the opening of the book, and so she's very concerned about things. And she insists that there has to be life after death. So she's not really going the scientific method, but what teenage kid would, right? And so to answer your question, you'll have to read the book to see the whole model of the soul. It's just too complicated. Well, actually, it's just too involved. I'd need a whiteboard and various things to explain it. But the fun thing about it is that you're along for the ride as she discovers all of the different pieces and brings them together into a model of the soul, which actually does incorporate a certain type of reincarnation and includes an everlasting, aware, conscious soul of a peculiar type. And again, I thought of this in the middle of the night walking around a swamp in Florida about 10 years ago. So you do need to go through, but let me just give you a hint. We have time for this. So let me just give you one little teaser.
Okay.
And this is a thought experiment. All right. So
gotcha.
Consider a biochemist and a guy named Rob McConnell is enticed by this biochemist into an isolated area. And the biochemist clones Rob, okay? He clones Rob, and then he's got some technique so that he can make Rob's clone grow up to be exactly the same age as Rob. And then he has a technique so that he can mark up Rob's body with any scars, any and all scars and moles and freckles that Rob has, so that they look identical.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same age, they look identical, and then of course this biochemist manages to map the brain of the original Rob onto the clone Rob's mind, so that the clone and the original both have exactly the same memories of the same experiences. They look identical. For all purposes, they in fact are identical. Okay, so now we have two exact duplicates of Rob. How do you feel about that so far?
So far, so good.
Okay.
Somebody to share the work with. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. But the bad part happens now.
Oops.
Is that the biochemist kills the original Rob, and then the clone Rob comes walking out. Now, so all the rest of us, we have no idea that the original has died. In fact, if we ask the clone will say, well, I'm Rob. Rob's not dead. I'm Rob. So the question is Rob dead? This guy that we see, all of our observables, well, not you, but me and everybody who listens to the radio show, we're totally unaware of Rob, the original Rob, being cloned and then being killed. And in fact, the cloned Rob is unaware of it too. So he's exactly the same. And because of that, another question, and this is the step of faith of whether you would believe this model of the eternal soul. And that is, does the cloned Rob have the same soul that the original Rob had? Because if he did, then the original Rob didn't really die. So it kind of boils things down to a few concepts. And in this thought experiment, what I call the clone paradox, it boils down to whether you believe Rob's really dead, and did the soul die?
Very.
Which basically comes back to, if you ask somebody, do you have a soul? I think that the defining quality of a soul is if they say yes or no, that they're conscious and therefore they've got a soul.
Couldn't a soul be a matter of belief?
Yeah, if you believe it.
Exactly.
Or not. So basically I'm equating the soul with something like consciousness, being aware, sentience.
Now that makes sense. Tell me, how do you explain people's experiences with haunted houses, ghosts, and, for example, how do scientists dismiss them?
Dismiss them?
Yeah.
I think that scientists dismiss them because, for a lot of reasons. And the biggest reason, really, is that as a scientist, the thing you're really after is discovery. But you've been burned before. When you analyze data, especially large amounts of data, like particle physics data, the kind of data that I've studied to death, is that statistical fluctuations pop up. So every now and then, and they're glorious moments, you'll be certain you discovered something, and then later, in most cases, almost all cases, but not every certainly, then you might find some mistake in your analysis, and then discover that no, it wasn't really there, and also, your colleagues will maybe come up with something that looks like a discovery, evidence for something really interesting, and then later it turns out that it really was just, kind of an unlucky fluke. So scientists are interested in discovery, and because of that, it makes them skeptical and sometimes cynical. An example I'm very fond of is cold fusion. You remember cold fusion in 1989?
Yes, I do.
This was Pons and Fleischmann from the University of Utah, I think it was, announced that they had basically cheap, free, easy energy by nuclear fusion on a desktop. And I was a graduate student at the time working on an experiment at the Stanford Linear Accelerator Center, and I believed it. I bought it because I understood their explanation perfectly, right? And this was one of the first seeming big discoveries that I really understood. And so I bought it. A bunch of the other graduate students bought it, and some of the postdocs, and we went ahead and put together an experiment. And like everyone else, and there were thousands of these experiments, there was nothing. There was no sign of anything. And that was hugely disappointing, and I felt personally robbed. And I think that that kind of thing builds on you. And again, scientists are smart people with big egos, and when they hear something that they're suspicious of, they're going to question it really hard. And if the answers aren't there, they're going to dismiss it. And so I think that's why it's easy for scientists to dismiss these things, just aside from the whole question of whether they really exist or anything.
How do you explain ESP, psychic phenomena, and clairvoyance?
You know, going back to this notion of being just uncomfortable calling people liars, and I think that I've talked to a lot of people who claim to have ESP or to be psychic or what have you, just because I like talking to people. Yeah. And the thing that I find very common among them is that I believe that they believe what they're saying is true. I don't think that what they're saying is true purely, but what I do think is that there are people who are very, very intuitive. Their flavor of intelligence is really fast, and that they acquire a great deal of information over the course of their lives and become really good at taking data that they're not even aware they've acquired and putting it together into a hypothesis about that person that just nails it. And that's what I think ESP is, and clairvoyance. I think that these are just people who are really intelligent in kind of a strange way. But no, I don't think that they're actually rooting around in your mind to dig up your thoughts.
You and I have to take our final break, Doctor. Please stand by, Exonation. My guest this hour is Dr. Ransom Stephens. He is the author of The God Patent. And if you've enjoyed our conversation half as much as I have here this past hour, you will certainly enjoy reading The God Patent. Visit his website for more information at www.thegodpatent.com. That's www.thegodpatent.com. We've got to take a commercial break. When we come back, our final segment with Dr. Ransom Stephens, the author of The God Patent. If you'd like to send us an email, Exonation, you know by now the email address is xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On MSN Messenger, you can always chat with our staff here at the X-Zone by using the MSN address xzoneradiotv@hotmail.com. And our website, www.xzoneradiotv.com. And to find out what's happening in the world of Paragators, our TV series, visit www.paragators.org. Dr. Stephens and I return on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Now you always say that you want to be free, but you come running back. I said you would, baby. You come running back. I told you so many times before. You come running back to me.
With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.mattstein.com.
Ransom.com.